So I watch Jimmy Kimmel occasionally. I actually think that this bit aired last week when Stormy Daniels was on. He gathered a bunch of folks together who are Trump supporters who oppose DACA, and then he did sort of a Q&A with them, and then he surprised them. He brought someone into the fold that was a DACA recipient and was about to be deported. So playing at the heartstrings there. And there was a guy by the name of Arthur Schaper, who is a blogger and a writer, and he was one of the guests for this segment. He wrote about this in Town Hall. I invited Arthur to come on here. I have a little audio from the bit as well that I want to play here this afternoon so people get the full feel for what happened. But Arthur, how are you? Thanks for coming on KMOX. I appreciate it.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Mark.
Where are you? Where do you live?
I live in Torrance, California, and just to rub it in a little bit, it is a beautiful 80 degrees here in SoCal.
Well, it's nice to talk with you, Arthur. We're going to have to go on that front. Yeah, that's a killer, man. It has been brutal here in Missouri, although we've had some days that have approached 50 or mid-50s. But yeah, we're jealous, okay? We're definitely jealous. So how did this happen? How did you get recruited with a bunch of other Trump supporters to be a part of this bit?
Oh,
we'll call it a bit, a wacky bit on late-night television.
Absolutely. I was the president of a local Republican club. ABC Casting had my number. They reached out to me, but they also reached out to other conservative activists. They wanted to do this segment. They were looking for people opposed to DACA. They said they were having a hard time finding people. I don't buy that. 4.5 million people voted for Trump in this state, including Democrats and independents. Many people are either too scared or disgusted with Hollywood. But I'm part of a group called We the People Rising and also LA County for Trump. We are seasoned activists. We know how to take on the media. Jimmy Kimmel we turned the tables on him. He thought we were a bunch of ignorant rubes that he was going to take advantage of. So we showed up at the theater. We went through the back row. Now, this is so telling, the irony. Okay, we had to sign in. They checked our bags. They wanted us to make sure we didn't have any weapons or any dangerous material on us. And yet at the same time, he wants to put pressure on us because we actually want our borders secure too. I mean, the irony was just immediately stifling. My friends and I, there were 5 friends. We all worked together going after illegal immigration in the state of California. And we went in knowing that Jimmy Kimmel is a bleeding heart liberal. The first photo I saw on the wall was a picture of Obama and Kimmel shaking hands, and that's the main picture on the Town Hall article. I decided to fix it. So
yeah, well, let's describe. So you put a Make California Great Again, your hat in front of President Obama and Jimmy Kimmel there to make that picture a little bit better.
Yes, a little bit better. Much better would be President Trump alone, of course, and Jimmy Kimmel in a jail cell or on the street. But that's another story. Anyway, so...
Oh, geez, we're going to put Jimmy in jail. His wife's from St. Louis here, Arthur. We don't want to put him in jail. He may be, be wrong on some of these issues, but I don't think we want to imprison Jimmy Kimmel, do we?
Well, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, with Crooked Hillary and all the stuff that's happening, who knows what's going to, who knows where this is going? I mean, I feel the media is colluding and corrupt, and these late-night talk show hosts having Stormy Daniels on, and this woman didn't do anything with Trump. She admitted it beforehand, so he got chumped twice.
Well, you got to remember, television's about ratings, and that's what that was. If I had a porn star willing to come on this show, you can bet, and it's radio, I would probably do it because it might be interesting. But let's get to your segment here. So you guys, because I want to play some of the audio from the bit. You described it in the piece as a rehearsal. You sit down with producers and basically get a little bit of the tone of what they were going to do, or is that not what happened?
Let me tell you what happened. So it's like they actually treated us very well. The production staff, the crew, they were glad that we showed up because they thought this was going to be a big segment, right? So they brought me and the rest of us into the editing room. They just sat around with us and listened to our points of view. They were respectful. They wanted to make sure that we were television ready, that we could handle being put on the spot by ourselves.
Yeah, right. Well, that's legitimate, right?
Yeah, so that wasn't a problem. And so the first segment, we all went on the steps. We all lined up. They put the microphones on us, et cetera. And by the way, the whole time I have the shirt with a picture of a real American dreamer named Reuben Morphine. I'll talk about that in a sec. So we go to the steps. We sit there. Jimmy Kimmel asked me a few questions. He said, for example, you're opposed to DACA. I said, yes. And he says, why? Well, up to 50% of them are fraudulent. We have to put Americans first. A lot of them are committing crimes. They are. Jimmy tried to cut me off and said, that's not true. I fired back. I said, yes, it is true. I even had the article ready. I had researched it before I even sat at the steps. Then he says to me, shaking my hand, I want you to meet somebody, setting up the segment.
All right, so let me stop you right there because the finished product that made it on the air features you and what were there, 4 other people or 3 other people?
5 other people.
Okay, 5, so 6 total, right?
Yes.
I'm never good at math, so thank you, Arthur, for correcting me there. So let me just give people a flavor for how this went down, and you tell me if one of these voices is yours, and I think eventually it is. Although you don't make it because you were so, I'm guessing because you were trying to tangle with Jimmy.
He was disruptive. He knew that I was smart as a whip, and he wanted to shut me down.
Yeah, he didn't use because they didn't use you in the finished product very much, did they?
No, they didn't.
All right.
Go ahead.
But let me play this. So this is the one guy. Here's Kimmel with this one guy here.
You told me a minute ago you're a diehard conservative Republican.
That's correct.
All your life?
All my life.
You support DACA?
No, I do not.
Tell me why.
Well, because their parents made a mistake of blatantly circumvent the rule of law.
Okay, now, Arthur, that was obviously a woman. Do you know her name? Who is she?
Her name is Celeste Gregg. By the way, she is an immigrant from Barcelona, Spain. It took her 5 years to become a citizen. That's something, too. Our group was more diverse than the panel and even the production crew. We had a black lady named Chanel. She married an immigrant from Belize and helped him get his papers. We had Lori Masonis. Her parents were immigrants, legal, from Mexico. And just how disrespectful Kimmel was. He was routinely shutting down the women, the conservative women of color on our panel.
Okay, but you don't really see that in the bit. So then he asked her this question.
Do you believe that someone who came to the United States as a baby, who is now an adult, should be sent back to wherever they came from?
I look at it this way. If they're an adult, they know they're here illegally, they could do as much as they can on their part to get legalized. At that point,
No
there's no
exceptions.
excuse. Correct.
So he's setting up the bit. Here's one more here.
If you're in this country illegally, you need to be deported. DACA recipients have been blessed to be in this country. They can take the skill sets they have, go to their home countries, and come legally.
All right, now that was you, right, Arthur?
Yes, it was.
Okay, that was you. So then he says, wait, I want you to meet someone.
So, this is Esmeralda, and this is her daughter, Rose. And Esmeralda came here. How old were you when you came to this country?
I was 2.
You were 2 years old. Your parents brought you here from where?
Mexico City.
From Mexico City.
Yes.
You have a baby now.
Yes.
And you are a DACA recipient. You signed up. You did a background check.
Yes.
You were fingerprinted. You have a job.
Yes.
You pay taxes.
Yes.
You go to nursing school.
Yes.
How many of you think it would be right for Esmeralda to be sent back to Mexico, a country that she's never known?
Now, if I did the count right, I think 3 of you raised your hands, Arthur, and then 3 did not. Is that, sort of accurate?
Yeah, but that's not really relevant because I got to tell you something. Remember, we went into the green room before this next segment, and we were all, immediately my head was racing. He says he wants me to meet somebody. I was prepared for him to bring
you
in
knew
a
that
10-year-old.
something along these lines was going to happen.
And I can't stress this enough to your audience. We really took Jimmy Kimmel down like a boss. He thought he was going to take advantage of us. We were turning the tables on him from day one. He was barely playing checkers. We were 3D chess. We knew what to expect. We've heard all of the sympathy-inducing, guilt-tripping arguments, and we refuse to be bullied by them.
Okay, hang on, because I'm going to come back and ask a few more questions about what happened. Also play a little bit more audio, because he introduced you to her fiance as well, and he's in the U.S. military. So, Arthur, hang tight. We'll come back with more here in a moment on KMOX, the Jimmy Kimmel appearance from last week that Arthur Schaper took part in with a bunch of other Trump supporters. All right, welcome back here on the Goodwill guest line. We're joined this afternoon by Arthur Schaper. He's a writer and a blogger and a big Donald Trump supporter. Went on Jimmy Kimmel's show last week for a bit they did on DACA. Before the break, Arthur, we were sort of setting this up and going through some of the comments on the segment that aired. So let me just kind of pick up right there, because he introduces you. Esmeralda is the woman who is a DACA recipient and perhaps facing deportation. Then he introduces you to Michael. That's the fiance.
Tell us about yourself, Michael.
I'm born, raised in Kansas, deep down the beautiful country. I grew up really strong conservative. I work in the max prison, and on my part-time job, I'm a United States soldier for the Army National Guard.
And Michael is being deployed soon overseas, which leaves his fiance
Yes.
and his daughter behind, which means his fiance could be sent back to Mexico while he's overseas.
All right, so I want to get your comments on that, Arthur, but let me play this, because this was the woman from Barcelona who was trying to engage Jimmy and say, look, we're all about compassion, but there's the law as well.
Jimmy,
Yes.
we can agree to disagree, but I know that you will concur with me that we live in a most loving, compassionate, and exceptional country.
No, I don't. I don't agree
Why
with that.
not?
Well,
I think this country has become cruel and
Well,
I mean,
okay.
look at this.
No.
The woman and her husband who's in the military.
Why do you think, Arthur, and apparently the rest of the people in the panel, that his example of Esmeralda and Michael and their daughter and the situation that they're in, he firmly believes that reflects a lack of compassion on your part and many other people who want to boot the DACA recipients out?
Okay, the fact is he tried to cherry pick the best case example. And honestly, this was another bad example. Why? Because this military personnel could marry her on the spot. Every one of us affirmed he just marry her. That would solve the whole problem. We already have a pathway to citizenship. I have friends in the military who called BS on Michael. Esmeralda's excuse was, well, we want to have a traditional Catholic wedding. Excuse me, you don't get to demand anything.
See, I'm glad you touched on this because that didn't make, and they brought it up. You guys did bring it up barely on the segment. I'm guessing it was a little bit more intense behind the scenes, but that made no sense that was his example when the marriage would take care of it.
Absolutely. My father fought in Vietnam. I have a friend of mine who served in the Navy for 10 years. He was outraged that a military brass would act like that and try to shame us for wanting our country's border secure to ensure the needs of Americans. Now I'm going to bring up Ruben Morphine. I was wearing a picture of a little boy on my shirt. You could not ignore that, even if Jimmy Kimmel repeatedly interrupted me and refused to. As soon as we sat down for the forum, I pulled out the shirt and showed it to the young lady and the little baby. I said, this little boy, 13-year-old, was executed by an illegal alien. Where were his dreams? And where were the dreams for the average of 25 Americans a day killed by illegals? It is a national disgrace, a travesty that Americans are killed by foreign nationals. Edwin Jackson was just killed by a twice deported drunk driver.
Yeah, the NFL player, right? The accident from the weekend.
And we have a president, finally, who is putting their dreams first, even if they can't fulfill those dreams. And we had Wes Parker. He was the older gentleman behind me. He has served in the Navy as well. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel brought that point out. And this argument about Esmeralda being gone for 10 years, that's a bunch of garbage. We all called that out and said, that's not true. There was already a legal pathway. And as you can see, and I sent this segment to one of your producers, a friend of mine pointed out how very poorly the production crew edited some parts of it. It was so clear that Kimmel went out of his way to silence us and to try to push the sympathy narrative to induce guilt and shame from the public.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, that was his agenda, and I would hope he'd at least be honest about that. But there were parts. I got to play this one part here because my guess, and you wrote about this, Arthur, in the town hall piece, you went a little bit more behind the scenes in detail, and I don't think you and Jimmy got along very well. And here's the point. He throws a very subtle slam when you're trying to make a point.
There was a young man, he was 22 years old at UC Irvine, and I spoke to him calmly and cogently, and I said, you are here illegally. This is not your country.
I'm trying to imagine he was a little boy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I can.
Now, he was not happy with you, was he? He said, I'm trying to imagine you, Arthur, as a little boy. And I think I can. Basically saying, you're kind of a jerk.
Well, here's the first thing. I don't want him to imagine me as a little boy because I'm afraid he might try to do something to me. We know about the pedophilia problems in Hollywood. So that's the first problem right there. And I even brought up the Harvey Weinstein scandals that are eating up Hollywood. Then they want to put our compassion on trial. Second of all, I pointed out the statistics I had mentioned at the steps. He mocked me and said, okay, fake news. Okay, Sean Hannity. Members of my friends on the forum fought back and called him out on that. So there was that issue. But the best part I wrote about, too, and I don't know how the censors work, so I'll censor myself as much as I can.
Yes, please do. Let's not get fined by the FCC, yes. I do have sound effects just in case, but let's, all right.
Yep, there you go. So it's like Lori Masonis, she went right back to the core argument we've always promoted. We have Americans in need. We have homeless veterans. In downtown L.A., I see them every day. It's disgusting. We have foster children in need. Lori tried to emphasize this over and over, but Jimmy, while slamming me, claiming I was interrupting everybody, kept talking over her, and I called him out on it, and I even said, why do you have a problem with this woman, this Latina? Is it because she has darker skin than you? He got so mad, he said, shut up, you a-hole. Everybody was shocked. I so triggered this guy. there is nothing more satisfying than triggering these arrogant liberals, especially when they're comedians. That's like, and I wanted to make sure that the world knew about this. Even though Kimmel and the production crew cut it all out, the fact is we really outgunned him in terms of morals, in terms of sympathies, in terms of facts. And we really turned the tables on him. And,
it would be, and this is not going to be possible. I know that you're kind of calling for this. It'd be great to see the whole segment, right? The whole conversation.
Sure. Yes. And the funny thing, though, is, I mean, as I mentioned to you, a friend of mine found out the editing, and he put up a video on this. And, of course, YouTube, through Disney, clamped down on it and called a copyright issue on that. Although the funny thing is, I saw people recording it on their cameras and uploading it to YouTube, and nobody screamed. The fact is, Disney, Kimmel, and a lot of the liberal wannabe intelligentsia in Hollywood should be really scared right now. They're getting it from both ends. They wanted to shame us and try to make us look bad when you could see Kimmel. And by the way, that little snide comment he made, you'll notice nobody in the audience laughed. It didn't even make sense. I'm talking about a DACA recipient at UC Irvine whom I confronted calmly and told him, you need to come in legally. I didn't dance around the issue.
Yeah, when I heard what he said to you, I thought, well, maybe that's just taken out of context from an earlier comment, because you could tell. I was looking, and I'm basing this on your article, so I knew there was tension there, and I looked at his face too, and the facial expressions and the body language was pretty clear that he didn't want to hear from you, or maybe from the other people. But Arthur, I'm out of time, so I thank you for coming on here. It's interesting. I'd love to see the entire segment. I think you guys held your own. It would be nice to go into something like that, because Jimmy was trying to convince you of something. He wasn't interested in hearing your arguments. It would be nice to kind of enter into these things with a little, I guess, willingness to hear the other side. And that would be true of you guys too. But I thought it was interesting, and thanks for coming on KMOX. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. That's Arthur Schaper on KMOX. We're back, second hour coming up.